we will begin with a question for you and your preview. How is the team preparing to address this game on Wednesday night?
Well, we're in this run of weekend, midweek games that putting an awful lot of stress on the bodies of these players. I think physically they're recovering. They look like they're recovering pretty well. And, they're a group of individuals that are very mentally in tune with their own bodies, what they need, how they need to recover. So a lot of this time is a quick turnaround, making sure that they're ready for the next challenge. We've got ourselves into a little bit of a routine. Our scout and our preparations are as close to the game as we can possibly get it. So a lot of those things stay fresh in their minds. But all in all, after the emotional disappointment of defeat in Atlanta, I think everybody's come away from that still with, some positives that we can certainly look at. We can try and reinforce and, make sure that we're certainly, with the same foundations and energies that I think have given us two, 3 really good performances and 4 points out of the last 4 games. So, it's still plenty to build on.
Thank you, Coach. We'll continue with you, Walker. Obviously, you have extensive experience playing under Oscar Pareja, the head coach for Orlando. What type of team and opposition do you plan to face?
Well, I think we got to see a lot of him at the MLS is Back tournament. He's a guy who has a lot of emotion. He's going to work them very hard. So I expect a fit team, a team that has played a lot of games because of making it pretty far in the tournament. A group that's going to be, like I said, hardworking. They're going to take after their coach in that regard. And but at the same time, I think there's a lot of ways that we can kind of prepare to get after them. So should be a good one. I think we're all excited for it.
Thank you, Walker. With that, we'll open the floor for question, and we will begin with a familiar face in Dre Hills with the Tennessean with a question for you, Coach.
Thanks, Chris. Gary, good afternoon. I want to, obviously, you mentioned it a little bit. You've had the long layoff, right, from February all the way until the Dallas pair of matches, and then you've had the 6-day layoff leading into Atlanta, and now you're having an even shorter time to not only recover but to prepare. With that in mind, and due to managing, as you said, the players' fatigue and how they're recovering, would this be, and also considering his 2 weeks with Nashville so far, nearly, would this be a time that Alex Muyl makes his debut for Nashville?
Well, you know me better than that, Drake. I won't be making any announcements on this call as to whether or not Alex will be starting or, playing a major role in this. What I will say is that the reasons that Alex was left behind over the weekend was to give him an opportunity to make sure he's fully settled in, that his period of time preparing and in quarantine was completely out of his system. He's had a good weekend. He's had a good session today. He's certainly in my plans and in my thoughts for the foreseeable future. So, he's a nice addition, and certainly in this run of games, he's an individual that I think we'll all be pleased to see in and around the group.
We will continue for another question for you, Coach, from Chris Harris from NBC4.
Gary, how you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Yeah, good. So my question is, you touched on it after the game on Saturday night, just about the scoring chances that just where the ball didn't hit the back of the net. How much of it is something that, in order to execute that, you can actually, work on in practice versus just needing more game reps for everyone under their belts. Just the more it becomes natural and the more you get into a rhythm, that's when it happens.
You're exactly right. You know, there's multiple things and multiple reasons that, you know, when you're looking at games like Saturday, for us and from our perspective, where things don't quite go according to plan. You know, we had a game plan set out, and I think it was executed in a very decent fashion by the players yet again, by the way. You know, when we went into the game, limiting a very, very bright and attack-minded Atlanta team was important, which I felt we did. Making sure that we disrupted a very possession-oriented Atlanta team regularly before they get in a rhythm or they, you know, confidence overflows. I felt we did that very well. And we still created some really bright moments. And I'm sure at half-time, and I haven't had the opportunity, you know, to speak to Stephen Glass about the game, but I'm sure he felt as though there were moments that they were let off the hook badly. And, you know, to that degree, we're very, very disappointed because we didn't make the most of what we'd worked for. However, to your point, you know, we've had a long time here without any games. We're 3 games into this, you know, first stage of scheduling again. And I, for one, after, you know, looking at the game again and just having a night's sleep and getting some of that disappointment out of my system, are very, very pleased at how the guys are going about their work, about their business. You know, there's lots and lots of good things to keep reinforcing. We do need games. The guys up front are normally the last individuals to find that sparkle and that feel in the final third. But when they do, and I've seen it before, when they do, it gives confidence to everyone, themselves included. You know, it breathes an air of you know, just positivity around the group once you get moving up front. And I've no doubt they will. The sooner it happens, of course, the better it'll be for everyone. But there's too many good things going on to get despondent. You know, we just keep moving in this direction, and we'll you know, we'll try and find the remedy for one or two of the disappointments of the weekend.
We will continue with Tim Sullivan from For Club and Country, who he will begin with a question for you, Walker, and follow up with Coach Smith.
Walker, how do you, even personally, but as a backline as a whole, kind of rebound from a little bit of disappointment when you guys honestly haven't had to face that much adversity so far through 5 games this year and have a strong game against Orlando?
I think we just continue to do what we've done every game, and that's try and limit opponents' chances, keep them to as few of shots as we can. That's an area that we've done really well all year. So, yeah, they got 2 on us. You know, on a personal level, I know I'm not happy with the goals on my end. Pretty unacceptable errors at this point in my career. So I'm really excited that we have a midweek game just to be able to flush that out, get back on the field, focus on getting 3 points. And again, it's a group that defensively we've been very sound, and I think continuing the foundation that we've had for, you know, the first 5 games.
So you want me to come straight in there, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Tim, do you have any follow-up, or is Coach ready to answer your question?
I had a separate question for Gary, but if he wants to kind of bounce back and answer the same thing, that would be perfect too.
Can you remind me what it was, Tim?
Yeah, from a defensive standpoint, you guys have been so sound all year. How do you rebound from the type of disappointment that you faced against Atlanta?
Yeah. Look, they've scored 4 goals against us this year. And I was saying this to a couple of the guys this morning. You know, the amount of good work that's gone on for us in those games, the the limited opportunities and sights of goal that they've had. I think we have to say as well, you know, we have to tip our hats to some exquisite finishing for the most part from a very talented group. And, you know, sometimes that happens. There's an awful lot of endeavour and discipline in our group. You can see that. And it's not just what the team's about. You know, I heard some comments on the reporting on the game or the commentary on the game, you know, about some defensive play. And I think sometimes, you know, you can be a little bit misguided in how teams are going about their business or what they are actually about. And I think I've said this before, there's a difference between an organised team and a defence-minded team. An organised team is a team that has a plan, that knows their roles within that plan and within that shape. And, you know, they execute as well as they possibly can, which is what we did at the weekend. We regained possession in their half numerous times. We got them on the back foot numerous times. We created some really nice opportunities and moments, but we were still able to limit them to very few opportunities. That's a plan. That's an organised team. A defensive team is one that really doesn't come out of their half too much, not all that keen on exposing themselves, don't have a lot of ambition, are happy to just soak up whatever they can and get out of there with whatever they can. And honestly, it couldn't be further from the truth with how these guys go about their business. So, you know, I am disappointed when I hear that on some of the broadcasting, and I think it's you know, it's misinterpreted. It's not the right picture of what this group's about.
Thank you, Coach. We will continue with a question from Tom Boger from MLSsoccer.com.
Hey guys, thanks for doing this. And a question, I guess, for the both of you, but about Orlando. Kind of going back to you said earlier about preparing for this team. I guess, you know, did you see anything differently from them against Miami than from their run at the tournament? And if so, is there anything that you guys feel that you know makes them a little bit more vulnerable than say they were during their, you know, again, run to the final at the tournament?
Do you want to go first, Walker, or do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, so for the most part, I've only seen the highlights. I haven't seen the game. I know we're going to tackle video pretty good tomorrow and see a lot of the ways that we can get after them and maybe stop some of the things that they do well. But, you know, just from having watched them in the MLS is Back tournament, I expect to see a lot of the same things. You know, they have some speed up top and on the wing. Obviously, they talked a lot about Chris Mueller having a good tournament. Teshu Akindele as well can score some goals. And then a hardworking spine of their group. So, you know, we've seen enough of them from MLS's Back for the guys who watched that. I'm really excited, like I said, to get back and have a midweek game, put the loss behind us and get ready to compete again. And I know everyone's going to be ready to do that.
Well, listen, I honestly think that they're quite a well-rounded team. I mean, Oscar has put together a group of players and utilised some of the guys that are already there in a slightly different fashion to maybe what they saw in the last year or 18 months. The confidence of the MLS Cup will I'm sure, be apparent in their play. I would imagine they'll be disappointed about the result of the weekend for sure. And coming back home, they'll be looking to put that right, no doubt. They've got a good spine to them, so they'll be competitive. They've got some very nice dimensions creatively, but I think most importantly of all, you know, you tend to get a feel about teams when you're watching them, and they're a determined group, and that makes for a tough game in whatever way, shape or form. Because if it isn't coming off for them creatively, then they've got a really good foundation to try and, you know, keep that underpinned and, you know, prevent us from creating too much, which I'm not sure every team's about. You know, when you look at some teams, they are about attacking. They haven't got a plan B. And when it's not working, they can be, you know, a little bit softer and easier to deal with. And I'm not sure that this group is.
We'll go on with a question from, actually 2 questions from Ben Wright with the Speedway Soccer. One for you, Walker, and another one for you, Coach. Ben?
Yeah, Walker, I'll start with you here. It feels like on the course of the season, just from looking at the stats and watching the games, you've done overall a really good job at limiting opponents' chances, just numbers of chances and the quality of those chances. And yet you've conceded 5 goals. Do you feel like that's a bit of bad luck, good finishing, or what on the other end? And how do you feel like you move forward from that?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't know what the expected goals is on the year, game to game, but I'm confident it would be lower than what we've allowed. Whereas on the other end, I think our expected goals for would be significantly higher than what we've scored. So over time, you know, like you said, it's only been 5 games. Over time, those things start to add up. So we try and, you know, maintain the positives that we've had. So what have we been doing well? We've been limiting chances. What can we improve on? Quality in the final pass, final moments, to be sharper, more decisive, and more clinical. And like, you know, 5 games in, after a long layoff, it's just going to take a little bit of time, get some rust off, and that's just how it goes for a lot of teams at this point. So, yeah, I would chalk that up to probably a little bit skewed in the early parts of the season.
Thank you, Walker. A quick reminder: if you have questions coming up, please alert me through the chat so I can continue to give you access. Then you can go on with the question for Coach.
Yeah, Gary, I feel like in a lot has been talked about missed chances in the past couple games. I feel like there's also been an element of just misconnections in the final third. Like going back and watching the Atlanta match, it felt like Dom Badji was making runs that others weren't on the same page with. Do you agree with that assessment? And how do you feel? Do you think that's just something that needs to develop with game time, or how does that get fixed?
I think you're absolutely right, Ben. You know, the players weren't always on the same page in that attacking third, but you know, as we've seen multiple times in many games, that can happen. You know, we're not the only team that don't fire on all cylinders. I think for us and for any team that's coming together in a brand new franchise, it can take somewhat longer to find that format, that formula, that understanding. You know, when all said and done, the very best attacking groups and even partnerships up front are players that, said before, they've got almost a telepathy. They understand each other. They're on the same page, and they get the very best out of one another. And I think we're still learning that. You know, you have to remember that the attacking guys have been in slightly different shapes. Hanny's played out wide. He's played underneath. You've had Dominic. You've had Daniel. You've had Abu, David Akam in the picture. You know, we've got some really terrific attacking players. And, you know, guys like Hanny and Randall, who are predominantly creators and suppliers, have just got to make sure that they're, you know, in sync with those guys. And it can take a while. There's no 2 ways about it. You know, with reference, though, to your point about conceding goals, you know, this will be our 5th away game in our opening 6 games of a brand new group. I'm not sure, and I think I read somewhere that this is the toughest start for any franchise ever in MLS. So we're going away from home with a brand new group. We've had 2 clean sheets. Walker's absolutely right about the expected goals and expected goals against. I think we sit somewhere, either in top or second spot for expected goals against. And if I tell you at the weekend expected goals were 0.44 for Atlanta, and expected goals for us was 1.65. Now, that's not the first time that's happened. So you don't win games on expected anything. You win games on what actually happens. But what we can do is continually keep, you know, those standards as high as possible, because ultimately I'm a firm believer in you end up being, you know, what you're actually seeing. At the moment, you know, we're losing games against the clinical front line. You know, we've lost our first 2 games, albeit nearly 6 months ago, against 2 very good teams. But I do think as we've returned from a long layoff, I think you're seeing a different type of group. You know, they've had time to be around one another. They've had time to reflect. We've had some real difficulties to deal with. And, you know, we're 1-1 in these last 3 games, 4 points. And I think everyone will be pleased about that. We're not delighted, but we're pleased. And I think it's something to build on. And, you know, the last thing I would say on that is I would hope that every player that goes into a game at the moment with our group feels as though there's a game to be won. We don't go out on the field thinking we're going to get, you know, dealt with away from home and we're going to have problems. I think we've got a strong foundation and we've got a lot to work with going forward. And it will come good, I believe that.
Thank you, Coach. We have another follow-up question from Ray Hills with the Tennessean, intended for both of you.
Right. So, Walker, I want to start with you, obviously, because it pertains to you and your restart since the long layoff. Obviously, there's been some rotation in and around you, but obviously you and Dave have been able to have that telepathy, but also have a succinct and consistent slew of performances. Is your physical starting to catch up now that you're going into, with the rest of MLS, a lot shorter of a break in between? Is there going to be a time where that happens, or is that occasion already happened in the past and you're just already back into regular season form as it is?
Well, you know, I think I'm really happy with how I've felt physically over the past 3 games, and given all the time that we had off, I think a lot of the guys would say the same. And you know, we worked like dogs for months when no one was watching. We couldn't play. This goes back to individual workouts. You know, we have a group of us who follow our Whoop devices and see each other's strains, so we're held accountable with each other. I know the coaching staff sees them as well, but you know, we're seeing what each other's doing on a daily basis, and guys, we're grinding. So, you know, it's I'm really proud of everyone, because that's not easy to do mentally. But now I think, at least how I'm feeling, and I think a lot of the other guys are feeling too, is physically strong, despite not having played in a few months and having short turnarounds. So Wednesday will be a good test to see how we can recover again on short rest. But for the most part, I think everyone's feeling pretty good.
Thank you, Walker. We will continue with a question, Tim Sullivan from earlier on. Apologies, Tim, that I cut you off. So a question for you, Coach.
No worries, Chris. Gary, what is kind of the rhythm of your practice sessions, even when you have this midweek weekend kind of schedule for the foreseeable future? And does it kind of remind you of being back in USL a little bit?
Yeah, a little bit. You know, to Walker's point there, you know, you got to remember a lot of the work that's done to actually win games is done way before the match actually takes place. And I know you've probably heard that, you know, from some great people, and there's some quotes out there on that. But, you know, these boys have worked tremendously hard. And, you know, I think we see the dividends of that in the type of schedule that we've got. That physically, they're in a good place. They're very conscientious lads. They look after themselves. You you know, we're doing our utmost at this point to make sure that the days beyond matches for the starting players are good days of recovery, get their bodies back in, you know, some decent order. You know, don't forget that we've had 3 away games, 3 flights in and out in a day, which, you know, I don't believe too many other teams have done to that degree in MLS. So it's a new concept. You know, there's a lot to deal with the body in, you know, playing and flying and getting back in the early hours of the morning. So we're trying to do our best to make sure that all the recovery options are there for them. For the guys that are not playing and are not getting the minutes that maybe the starters are, they're doing a bit of extra work and trying to keep them in a place where when they are needed, which I'm sure they will be, they're ready. So it's a reasonable program that I think's working pretty well at this point. And to be honest, I'll be guided an awful lot by the players out on the field. And if they feel as though they need a little bit more time to get their bodies in shape, then brilliant. And if they don't, I think we do have a fairly decent program at the moment. And in between all of that, you know, we need to do some prep work, some video work, and some practical work out on the field for our next opponent. So there's not a lot of time. I think we're getting a lot out of it. But most importantly, the players are ready for the next game physically, because if they're not, it doesn't matter what work we do on the video or out on the training field. If they can't get around the field, we ain't going to get it right.
We do have a final question from Ben Wright with the Speedway Soccer for you, Coach.
Yeah, Coach. We've seen Jimmy Medranda's name pop up on the injury report the past couple of weeks. Are you able to give any update on how he is?
Yeah, Jimmy's had a slight hip flexor problem. He's in a fairly reasonable place. I think he had a little bit of a setback last week, but I saw him out on the training field with our athletic trainers today doing some decent work. You know, I would hope he's not too far away, but you know, unfortunately for him, he has been he's been away from the first team group or the working group. But you know, as soon as Jimmy's ready, he'll be straight into the you know, the main body of work that we're doing, and he'll be fighting for a spot.